August 15, 1967, Rach Bong River in Suyen Province, South Vietnam. The Bailey Bridge was rated for 43 tons. 19 vehicles crossing at 1940 hours weighed 61 tons. The engineer who signed the safety report was Captain James Theodore Mitchell, 23 years old. He had never seen the actual steel they used to build it. At 1943 hours, the center span dropped. Bus number 12 tipped nose first into the river. Inside were 34 South Vietnamese civilians evacuating from a firefight 8 kilometers north. The bus hit the water at 37 miles per hour. The front windshield exploded inward. Brown River water filled the cabin in 9 seconds. 28 passengers drowned before the first rescue boat arrived. 6 more died in the hospital from crush injuries and internal bleeding. Captain Mitchell stood on the east bank holding a flashlight. He watched bodies float past in the current. The water was 31 degrees Fahrenheit. He could smell diesel fuel spreading across the surface like a chemical stain. He could hear screaming from the vehicles still trapped on the collapsed span, metal groaning as it twisted under the weight of 3 trucks and 1 Jeep suspended 40 feet above the water. He did not sleep that night. He did not sleep for 6 nights. On the 7th night, in a forward operating base 50 kilometers south, he sat in a tent and wrote a list of numbers on yellow legal paper. Payload capacity, actual load, steel grade specified in the contract, steel grade delivered by the Vietnamese subcontractor, margin of error, number of dead. The numbers did not forgive him. They never would. 2 years later, 1969, Fort Benning, Georgia. Mitchell was transferred stateside to train combat engineers. He had been promoted to major. He had a Bronze Star for valor under fire during the Tet Offensive. He had nightmares where he saw the bus tilting into the water in slow motion, frame by frame, like a film reel stuck on loop. His commanding officer, Colonel Raymond Hargrave, called him into the office on a Monday morning in March. Hargrave was 51 years old, a career officer who had built bridges in Korea and destroyed them in France during the final months of World War II. His hands were scarred from shrapnel wounds that had never healed properly. Mitchell, Hargrave said, I'm assigning you to the instructor cadre. You'll teach field fortification and temporary bridging to the new engineer officers. Start Monday. Mitchell stood at attention. His uniform was pressed. His boots were polished. His voice was steady. Yes, sir. Hargrave looked at him for a long moment. I read your report on the Rach Bong Bridge collapse. I read it 3 times. You know what I learned from it? Sir, that you understand something most engineers never learn until it's too late. Hargrave leaned forward. His voice dropped. Every structure you build is a bet. You're betting that the steel is what the contract says it is. You're betting that the welds hold. You're betting that the ground won't shift, and that the load won't exceed the rating, and that some idiot won't drive a 40-ton convoy across a 30-ton bridge because he's in a hurry to get his men out of a hot zone. Mitchell did not respond. And when you lose that bet, Hargrave continued, people die, not you, not the contractor, not the supply sergeant who signed off on substandard materials because it saved the Army $600. The people who die are the ones who trusted you to do your job correctly. Mitchell's jaw tightened, his hands clenched at his sides. He said nothing. So here's what you're going to teach those new lieutenants, Hargrave said. You're going to teach them that the difference between a bridge that stands and a bridge that falls is not genius. It's not courage. It's obsession with details that nobody else cares about. It's checking the steel yourself. It's walking every weld. It's calculating the load 3 times and then assuming you got it wrong and calculating it again. Hargrave stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, a company of trainees was running through an obstacle course in the rain. Because if you don't do that, Hargrave said, you'll end up like the officer who built the bridge at Rach Bang. You'll stand on a riverbank watching bodies float past, and you'll know that every single one of them died because you trusted someone else to do your job for you. Mitchell's voice was quiet. I was that officer, sir. I know, Hargrave said. That's why you're the only man I trust to teach this course. April 7th, 1971, Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. Major James Mitchell returned to Vietnam for his 2nd tour. This time, he was assigned to the 9th Engineer Battalion as the operations officer. His job was to oversee construction of forward operating bases, helicopter landing zones, and tactical bridges in support of the 1st Cavalry Division. On April 17, 1971 at 03:15 hours, he received an order that would test everything he had learned since Raich Bang. The radio call came from Lieutenant Colonel David Brennan, commanding officer of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry. Brennan's voice was clipped, urgent, barely audible over the static and the sound of automatic weapons fire in the background. Mitchell, this is Brennan. I need a bridge. I need it at grid coordinates X-ray Tango 476318. I need it in 6 hours. Can you do it? Mitchell was standing in the Tactical Operations Center, a plywood shack with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. He had a map spread out on the table in front of him. He found the coordinates. The location was a tributary of the Thach Hun River, 60 meters wide, moving water, soft banks on both sides. Sir, Mitchell said, standard procedure for a bridge at that location is 12 hours minimum. 6 hours is... I don't care about standard procedure, Brennan interrupted. I have 300 men cut off on the north side of that river. The NVA is moving armor into position to overrun them at dawn. If I don't get them out in the next 6 hours, they're dead. All of them. So I'm asking you one more time. Can you do it? Mitchell looked at the map. He looked at the clock on the wall. He thought about the Bailey Bridge at Raich Bang. He thought about the bodies floating in the current. He thought about the promise he had made to himself on the night the bridge fell. No structure leaves my hands unless I would bet my own life on it. Yes, sir, Mitchell said. I can do it. If you want to find out how Mitchell built that bridge in 6 hours and saved 300 men, hit that like button right now and subscribe if you haven't already, because Chapter 2 is going to show you the engineering trick that defied every regulation in the Army Field Manual. April 17th, 1971, 03:22 hours, Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. Major James Mitchell had 38 minutes to assemble a convoy, load 73 tons of bridging equipment, and move 12 kilometers through hostile territory in total darkness. The North Vietnamese Army had spotters on every ridgeline. One flare, one headlight, one mistake, and the convoy would be destroyed before it reached the river. Mitchell stood in the engineer compound yelling orders at men who had been asleep 4 minutes ago. His voice cut through the darkness like a serrated blade. Load the M4T6 treadway sections first. Tie them down with double chains. I want every truck combat loaded in 20 minutes. Anyone who takes 21 minutes walks to the river. Specialist Dennis Kowalski, 19 years old, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, stumbled out of his tent, pulling on his boots. His hands were shaking. He had been in country for 47 days. He looked at Mitchell and said, "Sir, are we driving without lights?" "Yes." "Sir, the road to the river has a 14-foot drop on the east side. If we miss the turn at kilometer marker 9, then we die," Mitchell said. "But if we don't get to that river in 6 hours, 300 men die. So you're going to drive without lights. You're going to follow the truck in front of you. And if you go off the road, I'll leave you there and keep moving. Do you understand?" Kowalski's face went white. "Yes, sir." At 03:58 hours, the convoy moved out. 11 trucks, 73 tons of equipment, 42 engineers, no headlights, no moon. The jungle on both sides of the road was so thick that the darkness felt like a physical weight pressing down on the vehicles. Mitchell rode in the lead truck with Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale, 34 years old, a combat engineer who had built bridges in the Central Highlands and blown them up in the Mekong Delta. Hale drove with his face 6 inches from the windshield, following the white line painted on the edge of the road. The speedometer read 12 miles per hour. Any faster and they would miss the turn. Any slower and they would not reach the river in time. At 04:36 hours, they missed the turn. The 6th truck in the convoy, driven by Specialist Thomas Garrett, 20 years old, from Mobile, Alabama, drifted 3 feet too far to the right. The front wheels dropped off the edge of the road. The truck tilted. For 2 seconds, it balanced on the edge of the embankment. Then gravity took over. The truck rolled sideways down the 14-foot drop, hit the bottom, and exploded in a spray of diesel fuel and sparks. Mitchell heard the crash. He heard Garrett screaming. He ordered the convoy to stop. He jumped out of the lead truck and ran back toward the wreckage. The fire lit up the jungle like a spotlight. Every NVA spotter within 5 kilometers could see them now. Garrett was pinned under the steering column. His left leg was crushed below the knee. His face was covered in blood. He was screaming the same word over and over. "Help! Help! Help!" Mitchell dropped to his knees next to the wreckage. The heat from the fire was so intense it burned the skin on his face. He could smell burning rubber and gasoline and something else, something organic, something that smelled like meat left too long on a grill. Sergeant Hale appeared next to him with a crowbar. "Sir, we need to move. We've got maybe 3 minutes before the NVA drops mortars on this position." "We're not leaving him," Mitchell said. "Sir, if we stay here, we're all dead." Mitchell grabbed the crowbar. He jammed it under the steering column and pulled. The metal didn't move. He pulled harder. His hands started to bleed. The column shifted half an inch. Not enough. Garrett's screaming stopped. His eyes rolled back. He was going into shock. Mitchell looked at Hale. "Get the cutting torch." "Sir, we don't have time." "Get the cutting torch." Hale ran. Mitchell stayed next to Garrett. He put his hand on Garrett's chest. He could feel the boy's heartbeat slowing. He leaned close and said, "Stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay with me." Hale returned with the torch. Mitchell fired it up. The flame was white hot, 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. He cut through the steering column in 90 seconds. The metal fell away. Hale grabbed Garrett under the arms and dragged him out of the wreckage. They carried him to the lead truck and laid him across the back seat. Mitchell looked at his watch. 04:41 hours. They had lost 5 minutes. They were now behind schedule, and in the distance, he heard the first mortar round launch. At 05:03 hours, the convoy reached the river. The tributary was 60 meters wide, moving fast, brown water churning over submerged rocks. The banks were soft mud that would collapse under the weight of the bridging equipment if they placed it wrong. Mitchell stood on the east bank with a flashlight and a stopwatch. He had 5 hours and 57 minutes to build a bridge that doctrine said required 12 hours minimum. He gathered his engineers in a circle. 42 men. Some of them had been awake for 36 hours. Some of them were 18 years old and had never built a tactical bridge under fire. All of them were looking at him like he was about to ask them to do something impossible. "Here's the situation," Mitchell said. "We need to span 60 meters. Standard procedure is to use M4T6 treadway sections with pneumatic floats. We assemble the sections on shore, float them into position, anchor them, and connect them. Total time, 12 hours. He paused. "We don't have 12 hours, we have 6. So, we're not following standard procedure." Specialist Kowalski raised his hand. "Sir, what are we doing instead?" Mitchell looked at him. "We're going to build the bridge in 3 sections simultaneously. One team works from the east bank. One team works from the west bank. One team assembles the center span on floats in the middle of the river. When all 3 sections are ready, we connect them and pray to God they line up." The engineers stared at him. Sergeant Hale said, "Sir, that's not in the field manual." "I know." "Sir, if the center span drifts downstream while we're assembling it, the sections won't align. We'll have a gap. The bridge will collapse under load." "I know." "Sir, if we get this wrong, 300 men are stranded on the north side of that river, and the NVA overruns them at dawn." Mitchell's voice was cold, flat, final. "Then we don't get it wrong." At 05:15 hours, the work began. The East Bank team started driving pilings into the mud using a pneumatic hammer that sounded like automatic weapons fire. The West Bank team swam across the river with cables to anchor the far side. The center span team assembled treadway sections on inflatable pontoons in the middle of the current, fighting to keep the structure from drifting downstream. Mitchell moved between the 3 teams like a man possessed. He checked every weld. He recalculated the load capacity 3 times. He watched the current and adjusted the anchor points. His hands were bleeding from torn blisters. His uniform was soaked with river water and sweat. His voice was hoarse from yelling orders over the sound of the hammers and the rushing water. At 07:42 hours, Specialist Kowalski fell. He was standing on the center span pontoon, attaching a treadway section with a wrench when his foot slipped. He dropped into the river. The current grabbed him. The weight of his body armor pulled him under. He surfaced once, gasping, his arms flailing. Then he went under again. Mitchell didn't think. He jumped. The water was 58 degrees Fahrenheit. It hit him like a fist. The current was moving at 6 miles per hour, fast enough to sweep him 100 meters downstream in 30 seconds. He swam toward Kowalski. His boots filled with water. His uniform dragged him down. He couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. He kicked harder. His hand hit something solid. Kowalski's arm. Mitchell grabbed it. He pulled. Kowalski's head broke the surface. He was coughing, choking, his eyes wide with panic. Mitchell dragged him toward the east bank. Sergeant Hale was standing waist-deep in the water, reaching out. Hale grabbed Kowalski and pulled him to shore. Mitchell crawled onto the mud. He lay on his back, his chest heaving, water pouring out of his mouth. He couldn't feel his hands. He couldn't feel his legs. For 10 seconds, he thought he was going to pass out. Then he stood up. "Get back to work," he said. At 09:12 hours, the bridge was complete. 3 sections, 60 meters, rated for 43 tons. Mitchell stood at the center and looked down at the water rushing beneath his feet. He thought about Rach Bong. He thought about the bodies floating in the current. He thought about the promise he had made. No structure leaves my hands unless I would bet my own life on it. He walked to the east bank. He picked up the radio. "Brennan, this is Mitchell. Bridge is up. Send your vehicles." Brennan's voice crackled through the static. "Copy that. First truck is moving now." Mitchell watched the convoy approach. 12 trucks, 300 men. The lead vehicle rolled onto the bridge. The treadway sections flexed under the weight. The pontoons dipped lower into the water. Mitchell held his breath. The truck reached the far side, then the second truck, then the third. All 12 trucks crossed. All 300 men made it to the south bank. The bridge held, but as the last truck cleared the span, Mitchell heard a sound that made his blood freeze. A sharp crack, metal under stress. He looked down. One of the welds on the center treadway was splitting. The crack was spreading. In 30 seconds, the entire center span would collapse into the river. Mitchell turned to Sergeant Hale. "Get the cutting torches. We need to reinforce that weld right now, or the next convoy that tries to cross this bridge is going into the water just like Rach Bang." Hale stared at him. "Sir, there's another convoy coming?" Mitchell looked at his watch. "Yes, and they'll be here in 11 minutes. If you want to know how Mitchell fixed that weld in 11 minutes and prevented a second disaster, hit that like button and subscribe, because Chapter 3 will show you the moment Mitchell's past and present collided in a way he never expected. 11 minutes later, the second convoy appeared out of the tree line. 12 more trucks, 44 more tons. 162 men sitting in the back, packed shoulder to shoulder, dust on their faces, rifles between their knees. The drivers could not see the crack in the center of the bridge. Major James Mitchell could see nothing else. The split in the weld had grown almost 3 inches since the first convoy had crossed. The metal edges were bright silver against the dark steel, like exposed bone in an open wound. Every time the river current surged against the pontoons, the crack widened another fraction of an inch. Mitchell stood at the near end of the bridge with the radio handset in his hand and sweat running into his eyes. The air temperature was 92 degrees Fahrenheit. His uniform was soaked through. His heart was beating so hard it felt like it was trying to punch its way out of his chest. "2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, this is Mitchell," he said. "Hold your trucks at the tree line." The convoy stopped. The first truck idled 50 yards from the bridge. The engine noise vibrated through the ground. The soldiers in the back shifted, looking at the river, at the treadway sections, at the engineers running along the span with cutting torches and welding rods. Lieutenant Colonel David Brennan's voice came over the radio, harsh and impatient. "Mitchell, why are my vehicles not moving?" "Because the center weld on this bridge is failing," Mitchell said. "It held for your first convoy. It will not hold for a second full load." "Are you telling me the bridge is unsafe?" Mitchell looked down at the crack. He could see it lengthening, millimeter by millimeter, under its own weight. The sound of stressed metal was a high, almost inaudible whine that drilled into his skull. "I'm telling you, if we put 12 fully loaded trucks across this span, we're going to have another Rach Bong," Mitchell said. "And this time, it won't be civilians in a bus. It'll be your men." There was a brief silence. Mitchell could hear voices in the background on Brennan's end, the distant thump of artillery, the flat crack of small arms fire. Then Brennan said, "I have one company still exposed on the north side. They are taking indirect fire. They are low on ammunition. They need to move now. What can you give me?" Mitchell closed his eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw the bus tipping into the river, the windshield exploding inward, water filling the cabin in 9 seconds. He heard the screaming start and then stop. He smelled diesel and blood and river mud. He opened his eyes. "I can give you a bridge that will carry light vehicles and infantry on foot," Mitchell said. "No heavy loads, no full cargo trucks. We strip the trucks, put your men on foot across the span, send the empty vehicles one at a time. That, I can promise, will hold." "That will take too long," Brennan snapped. "They are under fire now." Then we make it faster, Mitchell said. You start dismounting your men while we reinforce the weld. We cut 4 sacrificial braces from the outer treadways, chain them over the failing joint, and distribute the load across the adjacent sections. It will not be pretty, it will not pass inspection, but it will buy us enough margin to get your people across. How long? 20 minutes. I can give you 10, Brennan said. After that, I start putting trucks on that bridge whether you're ready or not. Mitchell looked at the crack again. 10 minutes. He thought about what Hargrave had told him at Fort Benning. Every structure is a bet. He remembered the list of numbers he had written on yellow legal paper after Rach Bang. Payload capacity, actual load, steel grade, number of dead. 10 minutes, Mitchell said. Then you get your men. The engineers moved like men who had run out of time 3 hours ago. Sergeant Marcus Hale took a cutting torch to the outer treadway sections, slicing off steel braces that had been designed to distribute weight along the edges of the bridge. Sparks showered his boots. The heat scorched his face. He did not flinch. Specialist Dennis Kowalski, still shivering from his near drowning, staggered along the center span carrying chains over his shoulder. His hands were raw and blistered. The skin on his fingers was torn open where his nails had bent backwards when he clawed at the riverbank. He could barely close his fists around the cold steel links. "Move, Kowalski," Hale yelled. "You want to go back in that water again?" "No, Sergeant," Kowalski gasped. They laid the sacrificial braces across the failing weld like splints on a broken bone. Hale wrapped the chains around them, pulling them tight with a cheater bar until the metal groaned. Mitchell checked every connection himself. The chains dug into the steel, biting down, transferring some of the load away from the cracked weld and into the adjacent sections. The crack was now almost 4 inches long. Mitchell felt the bridge shudder beneath his feet as the river surged. He dropped to one knee and pressed his palm against the treadway. He could feel the vibration running through the steel, the irregular rhythm of stress and relief, like the heartbeat of a man on the edge of cardiac arrest. For a moment, the bridge was not a structure, it was a body. It was a body with a wound in the center of its chest, leaking strength instead of blood. 3 minutes, Hale said. "Chains are tight, sir." "Good," Mitchell said. His voice sounded far away to his own ears. "Get off the center span. Everybody off except me." Hale stared at him. "Sir, that's an order." Hale hesitated. Then he turned and started pushing men toward the east bank. "You heard him. Off the bridge. Move." Mitchell stayed where he was, one knee on the steel, hand on the treadway, eyes on the crack. The taste of river water was still in the back of his throat. He realized he was holding his breath and forced himself to inhale. The air smelled like hot metal and mud and sweat. For a brief, terrifying instant, his vision narrowed. The jungle, the river, the men, the trucks at the tree line, all of it fell away. He was standing on a different bridge, in a different country, on a different night. The bus was sliding past him into the dark water. He could see faces at the windows. He could not hear them, but he could see their mouths open. His heart stuttered in his chest. For a second, he was sure it had stopped. The sound in his ears went from the whine of stressed steel to a deep, suffocating silence. Then something in his chest kicked hard, as if someone had punched him from the inside. His heartbeat came back, fast and ragged. He was in Vietnam again. The Rach Bang bus was gone. In its place was a 60-meter tactical bridge with a cracked weld and an approaching convoy. Mitchell stood up. "Time's up, Mitchell," Brennan said over the radio. "I'm moving my people." "Send your infantry across on foot first," Mitchell said. "Column of 2s. No running. Spread them out. Then send your trucks one at a time. Empty. 30 seconds between vehicles." "Understood." The first platoon broke from the tree line and jogged toward the bridge. Their boots slapped the steel as they stepped onto the treadway, helmets bobbing, rifles bouncing on their shoulders. Mitchell watched the center span. The chains creaked. The cracked weld held. More men followed. A second platoon. Then a third. The bridge flexed under the weight, but did not fail. The failing joint was no longer carrying the full load. The sacrificial braces groaned as they took up the strain. Mitchell felt the bridge move under his boots as if it were breathing. "That's 120 men," Hale said quietly, standing beside him now. "Another 42 in the rear elements." "They'll make it," Mitchell said. He did not know if that was true. He said it anyway. The last squad stepped off the far side of the bridge onto the south bank. They broke into a run, disappearing into the tree line where the first convoy had gone. "Infantry is across," Brennan said. "Sending trucks." The first truck rolled onto the bridge. It was empty, the cargo bed bare metal, the canvas cover stripped off to save weight. The treadway dipped under the tires. The pontoons sank deeper into the river. The chains over the failing weld snapped taut. The truck reached the far side. The second truck started across. Then the third. Each time the bridge flexed and recovered. Each time the crack lengthened another fraction of an inch. By the time the 11th truck crossed, the weld had split almost 5 inches. One truck remained. Truck 12 was different. It was a maintenance vehicle with a welded toolbox, a winch assembly, and a reinforced bumper. Even stripped of extra gear, it was heavier than the others. The driver, Specialist Jorge Ramirez, 21 years old, from El Paso, Texas, looked at the river, then at the bridge, then at Mitchell. "Sir," Ramirez called, leaning out the window. "Is it safe?" Mitchell looked at the crack. He could see it moving now, not just lengthening, but opening and closing with each shift of weight and current, like a mouth trying to form a word. "No," he thought. "Keep it in first gear," Mitchell said. "Slow and steady. Do not stop. Do not shift. Do not brake. You keep moving until you're on the far bank. Do you understand me?" Ramirez swallowed. "Yes, sir." He put the truck in gear and drove onto the bridge. The treadway under Truck 12 sagged more than it had for any vehicle before. The pontoons beneath the center span dipped so low that river water washed over their tops in dirty brown waves. The chains over the failing weld screamed as they took the load. Halfway across, the crack jumped. It did not lengthen gradually this time. It surged, shooting from 5 inches to almost 8 in less than a second. The sound was like a rifle shot. Half the weld tore free. The center span dropped 3 inches. The truck lurched. Ramirez slammed his hands down on the steering wheel to keep from being thrown sideways. The front wheels hit the far side of the failing joint and bounced. "Keep going," Mitchell shouted. His voice was raw. "Do not stop." The rear wheels of Truck 12 rolled onto the cracked section. The remaining weld screamed. The sacrificial braces bowed, steel bending under a load they had never been designed to carry. One of the chains snapped with a sharp metallic pop, the broken end whipping through the air so close to Mitchell's face he felt the wind of it. For a split second, the entire bridge held together through nothing but friction, habit, and stubbornness. Then the center span began to go. Mitchell saw it in the way the treadway tilted, in the way the pontoons shifted beneath it, in the way the cracked weld opened into a dark, jagged wound. He had exactly one thought: not again. He grabbed the radio and screamed into it. "Ramirez, bail out! Jump, now!"